Welcome to this explainer. We're jumping right into a literal high-stakes historical thriller from the ancient text of Judges. And really, at the heart of this entire narrative is an incredibly powerful, history-altering partnership between a prophetess named Deborah and a military general named Barak. So let's dive into this masterclass in ancient strategy, shifting power dynamics, and absolutely unbelievable suspense. Now, to really grasp the stakes of this story, we have to start with the brutal reality on the ground, the number 20. After a previous leader named Ehud passed away, the children of Israel fell into a really dark period. We're talking 20 long years of mighty oppression. I mean, think about what 20 years actually means in practice, right? That is an entire generation born and raised completely under the crushing thumb of Jabin, the king of Canaan. It's 2 straight decades of generational despair, crying out for relief, and having zero autonomy. So you might be wondering, why didn't they just rise up and fight back? Well, it all comes down to a terrifying technological advantage. King Jabin's army was led by a pretty ruthless captain named Sisera, who operated out of a stronghold called Hirosheth of the Gentiles. But Sisera's real power wasn't just how many guys he had, it was his hardware. He had 900 chariots of iron. Back in the Bronze and early Iron Age, an iron chariot was literally the ultimate superweapon. It was the tank of the ancient battlefield. If you're a force of lightly armed foot soldiers, a charge of 900 iron chariots on an open plain, that means absolute terrifying slaughter. That's the totally insurmountable obstacle they were up against. Right in the middle of all this despair, a truly remarkable leader emerges, Deborah. And she has a super unique profile. She wasn't just one thing. She was a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, and crucially, she was the active judge of Israel at that time. It's so important to get how radical this level of civil and spiritual authority really was. She wasn't hiding behind the walls of a fortified palace. Nope, she held court right out in the open, sitting under a specific palm tree, literally known as the palm tree of Deborah, between Ramah and Bethel. People flocked to her from all over the nation for judgment, looking for wisdom, dispute resolution, and honestly, a way out of their 20-year nightmare. She was the undisputed authority. Exercising that immense authority, Deborah makes a massive, decisive move. She sends for a military man named Barak, calling him down from Kedesh Naphtali. And she doesn't just give him some friendly advice. She gives him a direct divine command to rally an army of 10,000 foot soldiers from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun at Mount Tabor. And the tactical plan she lays out? It sounds completely absurd on paper. She tells him God will draw the enemy captain, Sisera, and his massive, heavy iron chariot army right out to the river Kishon. Think about that. She is telling lightly armed foot soldiers to face the ancient world's ultimate superweapons down in a riverbed. But her promise to Barak is rock solid. God will deliver Sisera into his hand. And honestly, this is where the dynamic between Deborah and Barak really takes center stage. Barak hears this wild command to fight 900 tanks with foot soldiers, and he gives her a very strict ultimatum. He looks at Deborah and says, "If thou wilt go with me, then I will go. But if thou wilt not go with me, then I will not go." He absolutely knows her spiritual authority, and he needs her there to legitimize this crazy battle. Deborah agrees immediately, saying, "I will surely go with thee." But she drops a massive, chilling caveat. Because he hesitated, she prophesies that the ultimate honor of the victory won't actually be his. Instead, she says, the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. Boom. With that incredible prophetic twist forever linking them together, they head off to prepare for war. So the pieces start moving rapidly across the geopolitical chessboard. Barak successfully rallies his 10,000 men, and true to her word, Deborah marches right up there with him to the high ground of Mount Tabor. Of course, word gets back to the enemy camp, and Sisera doesn't waste a second. He mobilizes his absolute maximum force, all 900 iron chariots and all his people, and moves them down into the valley, right to the river Kishon. The sheer scale of what's about to happen is terrifyingly clear. You've got 10,000 lightly armed guys looking down into a valley just swarming with the most advanced, lethal military tech of the day. The tension is literally at its absolute peak. The two armies are locked in a standoff. And once again, it's Deborah, standing right beside Barak, who spots the exact perfect moment to strike. She turns to her general and delivers this legendary battle cry. Up, for this is the day in which the Lord hath delivered Sisera into thine hand. Is not the Lord gone out before thee? She is the ultimate catalyst here. Notice the absolute certainty in her voice. It's not, I hope we win. It's, this is a done deal. Completely fueled by her conviction, Barak and his 10,000 men surged down from the safety of Mount Tabor, charging straight into the teeth of those iron chariots. And what happens next is just a total, unprecedented military upset. Against all logical odds, the text tells us that the Lord discomforted Sisera, which basically means he threw them into absolute panic and confusion, along with all his chariots and his entire host. Acting on Deborah's perfectly timed command, Barak's foot soldiers utterly wipe out the terrifying chariot army with the edge of the sword. The Canaanite forces just break and run. Barak relentlessly chases the fleeing army all the way back to their stronghold until, literally, there was not a single man left. It is a complete wipeout of King Jabin's military might, an absolute victory totally dependent on Deborah's timing and Barak's execution. Okay, but here is the million-dollar question. In all this total chaos, where did Captain Sisera go? The man who commanded those 900 chariots quickly realizes his heavy iron superweapon is now just a death trap. So he abandons his vehicle, leaves the symbol of his power in the mud, and flees the battlefields completely on foot. Let's shift our focus to track the desperate fate of this once mighty Canaanite captain who is now literally running for his life. Exhausted and terrified, Sisera runs toward what he firmly believes is a safe haven. He makes a beeline for the tent of a woman named Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. Now, Heber the Kenite had a really interesting geopolitical setup. Even though he was descended from the family of Moses, Heber had basically severed himself from the rest of his tribe. He pitched his tents in the plain of Zananim and, critically, he had a formal peace treaty with King Jabin, who is Sisera's boss. So, in Sisera's mind, he is running straight into allied, friendly territory. He is 100% sure he's found sanctuary. But this is exactly where the story takes a super dark psychological turn. Look at the methodical, incredibly comforting steps Jael takes as this enemy commander stumbles up. She doesn't wait for him, she actively goes out to meet him, telling him, "Turn in, my lord, fear not." She brings him inside the tent and immediately covers him with a mantle, hiding him from sight. When he begs for just a little water because he's dying of thirst from running, she doesn't give him water. She opens a bottle of milk, a richer, much more soothing drink, gives it to him, and covers him right back up. She is deliberately and systematically disarming the guy, bringing down his adrenaline and making him feel completely cared for and protected. Sisera is completely taken in by Jael's hospitality. The once terrifying commander is now just a desperate, weary fugitive. He gives her his final request, basically asking her to be his lookout. He tells her to stand in the door of the tent, and if anyone comes looking for him, she needs to lie and just say, "No, there's no man here." Trusting her completely and totally wiped out from the battle and his escape, his adrenaline finally just crashes. Sisera's breathing slows down, and he plunges into a deep, deep sleep, totally lulled into a false sense of absolute security. Now the narrative dramatically scales down from the massive, chaotic plains of a chariot war to its most claustrophobic, intense moment. With the commander fast asleep, Jael completely drops the act of the comforting hostess. She grabs a nail of the tent, which is basically a massive wooden or metal peg used to hold down heavy nomadic tents, and she picks up a workman's hammer in her hand. These are just the everyday tools of her life. And she creeps softly, silently, right up to the sleeping Sisera. In a single, shocking, and incredibly brutal act of violence inside that quiet tent, history is permanently altered. The text doesn't mince words here. She smote the nail directly into his temples with so much force that she fastened his head straight into the ground. Remember, he was completely vulnerable, fast asleep, and weary. And just like that, so he died. It's crazy when you think about it. The absolute greatest military commander of Canaan, a guy who commanded 900 iron chariots, isn't killed by a fellow general in epic combat. He is assassinated in his sleep by a woman wielding standard camping equipment. Shortly after this, Barak finally arrives at the encampment, hotly pursuing his ultimate target. Jael walks right out to meet him and says, "Come, and I will show thee the man whom thou seekest." Barak steps inside the tent, and there is the gruesome, unforgettable scene. And you guys, this moment brings us full circle, right back to that crucial interaction between Deborah and Barak before the battle even started. As Barak stares at Sisera lying dead, pinned to the earth, he is staring face to face at the undeniable truth of Deborah's prophecy. Barak definitely got his absolute military victory over the army, but just as Deborah promised, the ultimate honor of taking down the mighty Sisera was sold entirely into the hand of a woman. The sweeping cause and effect of this single day completely shifted the geopolitical balance of power in the ancient world. God subdued Jabin, the king of Canaan, on that very day. Those 20 long years of brutal oppression finally broken. From that moment on, the text tells us the hand of the children of Israel prospered and just kept growing stronger against the Canaanites. They maintained the upper hand and prevailed continually until they completely and totally destroyed King Jabin. A 2-decade nightmare was unraveled by one coordinated strike, all built on the unshakable partnership of Deborah and Barak. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. We so often assume that history is decided exclusively by massive armies, technological superiority, and famous generals clashing on open fields. But how often do the monumental tides of history actually turn through unexpected actors in the quietest of places? This whole domino effect started with the dynamic between Deborah and Barak, the visionary prophetess who saw the perfect strategic opening, and the general who demanded a partnership. That single alliance set the stage for everything, even empowering a supposedly neutral woman in a quiet tent holding a hammer. The most shocking victories really do arise from unusual alliances. Thanks for exploring this incredible historical narrative with me. Keep looking for those hidden turning points in history, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.